Hello and welcome to a new episode of Uniper's Market Insights. My name is Florian Oberländer. Nice to see you, or nice that you are listening. And of course, the show wouldn't be the same without you, our chief analyst, Gregor Pett. Hi, Gregor.
Hi, Florian. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's always a pleasure. But before we start, I just wanted to let our audience out there know that you don't necessarily have to watch us. You can listen to us as well, because we are also available on Spotify, Audible, and on Apple. I hear about people even listen to us while running outside.
I can imagine it's quite attractive not having to watch us, actually.
Probably. Just in case you are running right now, pace yourself, because we prepared a nice potpourri of topics again. We'll discuss the blackout in Spain, take a look at the big picture of LNG, give a little insight of the market analytics team, but we will start, of course, in the Middle East. In this format, we often discuss that an escalation would have an impact on the energy markets. Mm-hmm. Over the last couple of weeks, the tensions have been rising and escalated. How did the markets react?
Yeah, the market reaction was actually quite moderate. The humanitarian situation aside, which is of course terrible, the impact on the energy markets was limited. So we've seen some shut-ins of Israeli gas production. Iranian oil infrastructure was hit, in particular refineries and storage tanks. The big event wasn't there, so everybody was talking about a Strait of Hormuz blockade scenario. This is where 20% of the world oil supply go through by tanker. Blocking this would of course be a major event for the energy markets, and this hasn't happened so far.
Would Iran be able to do that?
They could do it, but the question is how long would it sustain? So I don't think it's in the interest of Iran to do something like that, because it would alienate them from other important countries, not only the US, but also other countries like Qatar in the Gulf region who would be affected by that, but also China, who's a major customer of energy out of the Gulf region. It would be less in the interest of Iran to basically alienate all those countries. Mm-hmm. The second question is how long would it take then to clear the blockade? All the countries I mentioned have significant sources, ships in the region, so it would probably be a possibility that it could be cleared quite soon, and any blockade wouldn't take long.
Okay, so an unlikely scenario at this point of time.
Well, it's unlikely that it would last for a long time, but it could happen. Yeah, okay. So this is what I would say.
What is your personal view on what will the situation look like?
First of all, I mean, let's hope that the ceasefire we have as we speak right now, we can only hope that the ceasefire would hold. However, the underlying cause of the conflict will not go away. We can only hope that the countries involved will work towards a diplomatic solution. We also have to acknowledge that there are more and more sources than also from the US who say, well, it's not yet clear which damage has been done to the Iranian nuclear program, and some doubts whether that program has now been stopped. Some sources say it's only delayed. The underlying root cause of the conflict is not over, and therefore I think this conflict will prevail. Okay,
some risk remains attached to the thing, yeah, but it's obviously something we take a close look at, yes, and of course report on in this format as well. Maybe switching to a little bit bigger picture when we talk about LNG. We had a study coming out from ACER, which is the Agency for Cooperation of Energy Regulators of the EU, with a few numbers attached to them, which I would like to highlight here before I come to my question. So LNG production rose last year. European Union remains biggest importing region in front of China. LNG has almost doubled in comparison to 2020. Regasification facilities were built as well. USA remains the biggest LNG player with 30% in front of Qatar and Australia. Now we see damped demand from Asia, and currently the LNG picture in Europe looks quite decent. Is this okay like it is, or does it need improvement down the line?
In Europe, we have taken significant steps to build up LNG infrastructure and to become more resilient and independent of pipeline supplies from Russia in particular. And the numbers you quoted indicate that a lot of the LNG supplies formerly from Russia have been replaced by LNG. It still is important. It will be also important in the future. We must not discontinue these activities or our ambition then to stay like that. So it would be not the right measure then to say, well, we can relax, we can roll it back, etc. So it is important, and it will be important for the near future.
Staying with that, looking at the 2030 decarbonization goals, of course, looking at the development of renewables and also hydrogen, ammonia, and so on, it seems like we are a little bit behind in these categories. How important is LNG when it comes to that?
All these alternatives that you mentioned, and hydrogen in particular, are not being built out in the speed that a lot of people hoped, let's say, 2 years ago. So it's much more difficult, not least from a financing perspective in the light of the geopolitical situation. So priorities change, and security of supply is now suddenly much more important than it was certainly before 2022. This shows that priorities are dynamic. In the light of this, for sure, LNG and natural gas for the near future is certainly and will remain very important.
Okay, understood. Yeah, we recently signed a contract there with Woodside as well. So to you there, if you're interested in that topic, just check out the press section on our website. Coming to our question from the audience, which are always my favorite ones. This one comes from Emily, and she basically wants to know, the world seems to be upside down right now. How do you deal with that as a company or as the market analytics team?
Yeah, the more recent case, US strike against Iranian infrastructure, happened on a weekend. If something like that comes up, you have to work through the weekend and find out what it means for the markets. So we concentrate, of course, on the energy situation. The humanitarian situation, of course, is terrible, but neither the humanitarian nor the political situation or the military situation is for us to comment on. For us, of course, it's important to understand what's going on so we can estimate the impacts on the energy markets. But still, you don't work around the clock, so that's also not necessary, but you constantly monitor what's going on and try to understand what it could mean for, in our case, the energy markets. It's difficult to compare a crisis, in particular when it comes to human lives being at risk in those crises. I would say we've had some crises in the past where we had to react in a similar way, from September 11 in 2001 to the financial crisis, but also the German nuclear phase-out, which was then triggered by the great earthquake in Asia that led to the Fukushima reactor catastrophe. This, of course, were all situations where we also monitor this very closely and figuring out what it means for the markets.
So very interesting department for sure. You also have offices that report around the globe as well.
In a situation like that, we have people in the Gulf region, and we talk to them, of course, very closely because they have insights that we don't have, and they observe also a couple of hours ahead of the media here. This is what we do. We talk to our people there. And of course, for us as a company, it's predominantly important that these people are safe. So that's not the task of my team, but as a company, of course, we have to make sure that the colleagues there are safe. But we can also reach out to them so we have a better understanding of the situation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Also for making this format happen, because you have people within your team that help us prepare, of course, the content and stuff like that as well. It's from weather to currencies. You take a look at almost everything.
Yes.
We come to our last point already. Blackout in Spain dominated the news a couple of weeks ago. What actually happened?
Within a very short period of time, the Spanish grid lost more than 2 gigawatts of capacity, now believed to be a cascading effect, where basically assets were going offline then, and this cascaded to cause a major blackout in the Iberian Peninsula. The current reports indicate that there's no sign of a attack, of a cyber attack, for example, etc. That was some early rumors in the press, but there's no indication of that as far as we see right now. But it shows the vulnerability of grids that are relatively isolated and that are basically isolated as in don't have a lot of neighbors where they can get the energy from. Also dominated by renewables in feed and have less controllable capacity that can basically help to balance the system.
Okay. Yeah, maybe to put some numbers behind it as well. I saw an estimation over that 10-hour period that the losses were around 1.6 to up to 4 billion euros for just the 10 hours. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for an economy that is very much dependent on energy, like as every developed economy, that can be a major blow.
Of course, we in Germany ask ourselves, is that an option for a possibility to happen in Germany as well?
It's a theoretical possibility. The likelihood is much lower than in the case we just discussed. Germany is very much in the middle of Europe, so we have a lot of neighbors that can help to balance the system. The markets are coupled. We have many coupling points. That's one thing. And also we have what we call rotating masses in the system that help to stabilize. So if you have turbines, for example, that is rotating equipment that continues by force of inertia to rotate, and that helps stabilize the system in case of a similar situation. It shows the importance that a system needs that. I mean, it can also be achieved by other means. It's not only possible with gas or coal plants. You can also upgrade other energy sources to do that, but it takes effort, it takes time, and it takes money. Regulators, of course, need to incentivize that and make sure that the grid is able to cope with such a situation. So, for example, companies like ours need to be also incentivized to provide the products that are needed to stabilize the grid in such a situation.
Yeah, and we should have the reserve capacities in place.
Exactly.
As well. Okay, good deal. Gregor, to finalize this episode, I know there are turbulent times on the markets. Like, what are your main takeaways?
It's always interesting, but this is again one point of time where a lot of things happening, and you need to watch that situation. You need to also be cautious not to be carried away by the situation of people involved in that. So that is of course terrible. But our task is of course to keep the energy supply safe, and we need to concentrate on that task as part of our mission.
And then we will report back on what is happening in the energy markets after a short summer break. So probably around August, September, we will then record the next episode. Thank you very much, Gregor.
Thank you. Take care.
And thank you for listening or watching. If you are still on your running route, we hope you will arrive safe. Hope you tune in next time again. Until then, bye-bye.